Today you're going to learn to draw the blood supply to the brain and the spinal cord. I'm going to draw all of the arteries first and then we'll fill them out together in the end. So I'm starting with drawing the vertebral arteries through the transverse foramen of the cervical spine. They start at C6 and comes out of C1. I'm going to draw a big circle here. This represents your foramen magnum of your occipital bone. So the vertebral arteries are going to go through the foramen magnum to go to the brain, and they're going to anastomose and form the basilar artery. And then I'm just going to draw these two little lines for later. Now I'm drawing two more circles which represent your carotid canals. And like the name, the internal carotid artery will go through again to go to the brain, and this time they'll have three branches, which are your anterior, middle, and posterior cerebral arteries. So you have your posterior, and then your middle to the outside, and then anterior going to the top, and there's another anastomosis there at the top. Now I'm going to draw two branches, which is your posterior inferior cerebellar artery. Coming out of those are your posterior spinal arteries. Now these go through your vertebral foramen down to T12 along with your spinal cord. Along with this, you have anterior spinal artery running with your spinal cord and your posterior spinal artery, also going through that vertebral foramen. I'm just going to draw two more branches right here, which we'll fill out later together. So this circle is your circle of Willis. Now again, this is made out of the anterior cerebral artery at the top, which anastomose with each other. You have your middle cerebral arteries, and then in the middle, coming off of the basilar, is your posterior cerebral artery. So in the middle, you have your basilar artery. You only have one, so you're looking at this from the posterior view. So this is the right side, and that's the left side, but you only have one basilar. Now, on the side going through the carotid canals, you have your internal carotid arteries. So we're jumping around a bit here, but we're going to go back to that basilar artery. So at the top, the pair of branches over here are your superior, inferior cerebellar artery. Now below that, you have your anterior, inferior cerebellar artery. Now below that, coming off of the vertebral arteries, we have your posterior inferior cerebellar artery. Now coming off of the posterior inferior cerebellar, you have your posterior spinal artery. And then coming off of the vertebral arteries, you have your anterior spinal arteries. Now these spinal arteries go along with your spinal cord. Now this is your vertebral artery through the transverse foramen. And these are the major arteries that supply blood to the brain and the spinal cord.